I'd like to welcome you to CWRAP, Conversations with Rotary Action People. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Tonya Matthews, President and CEO of the International African American Museum, located in Charleston, at the historically sacred site of Gadsden's Wharf, one of our nation's most prolific former slave ports. As a champion of authentic, empathetic storytelling of American history, IAAM is one of the nation's newest platforms for the disruption of institutional racism as America continues to walk towards a more perfect union. Dr. Matthews is a thought leader in inclusive frameworks, social entrepreneurship, and education. She has written articles and book chapters across these varied subjects. She is founder of the STEMinista Project, a movement to engage girls in their future with STEM careers. Matthews is also a poet and is included in the 100 Best African American Poems, edited by Nikki Giovanni. Matthews received her PhD in biomedical engineering from Johns Hopkins University and her BSc in engineering from Duke University, alongside a certificate in African American Studies. So what I'd like to do is everybody just be sure to mute yourselves, and Dr. Matthews will go ahead with the presentation. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and we will monitor those questions and answer those at the end of the session. So with that, Dr. Matthews, welcome.
Thank you very, very much, Lou, and everyone else who is joining us this afternoon for this wonderful introduction and conversation. Great pronunciation there, Lou. Yes, it is the STEMinista Project. This is what happens when poet meets engineer and we start making up words in terms of what's happening there. So as was mentioned, I am Dr. Tonya Matthews, the humbly proud President and CEO of the International African American Museum. So welcome to the federal Juneteenth holiday. Hopefully you all got to engage in some activities yesterday or over the weekend. Hopefully a little bit of music, hopefully a little bit of history, and a whole lot of food. Food is culture. And it's one of the big things, big things that I think we need to delve more into. I'm excited to present a quick overview of the International African American Museum. We just announced that we will be opening January 21st, 2023. For anyone who has been following this story, I'm sure you have raised a glass along with me. This has been a 22-year journey to bring this amazing space and place of reclamation to fruition. And so we're really excited to be opening in the new year. And I'm going to try to go relatively quickly. So when you have those questions, definitely throw them in the chat, because I want to honor people's break times that we've put in. So as was mentioned, the place has a story, and the building tells a story, and then we invite our visitors to find their own story. So that's the way I'm going to organize kind of this conversation. As was mentioned, the International African American Museum is being built upon the former site of one of our nation's most prolific international slave trading ports. What does that mean when we say prolific? So for anyone who is familiar with the Charleston Peninsula downtown area, our facility would have stretched, the Gadsden's Wharf would have stretched several blocks inland, all the way up to the Gilliard Performing Arts Center, and would have been almost just as wide, right? So the historical record will show us that the space could hold up to 16 of these amazing slave trading ships during its heyday. So don't think rowboat, think cruise ship, think some of those cargo ships that we see. And so you can get a little taste of before and after in this first image that we have here. And rule number one is never give an engineer a time-lapse video, because it will show up in every presentation that she does. And so you can sort of watch us being built. We are a built from ground up site. And so that also entailed doing some archaeological digs. in the beginning, what we were planning. We did not find any artifacts, but we did actually find remnants of old buildings and structures, which in and of themselves became architectural artifacts for us to think through. All told, will be just under 145,000 square feet or so, and that's going to include our office spaces, which are going to be on the top of the building. Our interior spaces, we have several core galleries and a small movie theater in there as well. And in addition, our exterior space. Now you can see from the video that's happening is that the building is actually raised upon 18 13-foot pillars. And many folks, of course, associate that with us being here in the Low Country and near the water. But actually, the story behind that story is that our architect, Mr. Henry Cobb of Pay, Cobb and Freed, when he got the contract and began understanding the history of the space and what we were trying to do here, he took on our language that this is hallowed ground. And out of that, his design then called for the museum itself not to touch the ground because he decided that the ground was more important than the structure. And that's actually why our design raises us up on those 18, 13-foot pillars. And that then essentially created our first floor, our exterior space, which is the African Ancestors Memorial Garden. So here are sort of 3 images of the types of things you'll find in that exterior garden. It's got a garden within a garden design. So there are different areas that have different themes, different art installations, different plantings. Our landscape architect is a gentleman by the name of Walter Hood from North Carolina, but now out on the West Coast. A very well-known, well-established African-American landscape architect. And you can sort of see from the slide that he has recently been named a MacArthur Genius Award winner, which we're very proud of. Most excited. The project has been going on for so long. We have pre-genius relationship with Walter. And so we're very excited about that. One of the things that I will point out is as you see that the young man walking between 2 polished granite walls alongside kneeling figures. So this is one of the things that we work to think of through and interpret and deal with and hold at the International African American Museum. If you ask me, one of the greatest gifts that African Americans can give to our nation, if not to the entire world, is our ability to simultaneously hold the sensations of trauma and joy. Not trauma on Tuesday and joy on Thursday. They constantly weave together. It is a hard-won skill set from the totality of the African American journey, which is part of what we do here in this space, in our space. As I mentioned, there was, of course, an archaeological dig prior to building, and we found some things. One of the things that we found was some of the foundation of a former storage house. We have to come to grips with the fact that in reclaiming a space like this, like a former slave trading port, we're going to have to acknowledge some hard lessons there, which is one, we're not really talking about the transportation of people. We're talking about the importation of a commodity, of a livestock. And so when you see these places, those are the kinds of remnants you're going to have at that facility. And so case in point, we found the storage house. Like any other storage house, it's where you hold your commodity to clean it, to label it, to sort it, perhaps to even hold it, waiting for the price to go up. And so what the historic record showed is that the remnants of the storage house that we found was that at one moment, there were just over 700 souls being held in the storage house, waiting for their price to go up. An unexpected chill came through the Low Country, and we lost all 700 souls in a single event. And so when the historical record tells you that, and you've got the remnants of the space, what do you do with a space like that? You could rebuild it, but that's not exactly the kind of experience that we're trying to be. We did not want to rebuild the storage house. We could have covered it up. That is definitely not the kind of place that we are trying to be. So that was not an option. So we worked with Walter Hood to create this amazing sort of art installation and conversation with this space. And so what you would be looking at is there is a one-dimensional brick outline of the square rectangle shape of the storage house. And then cutting across that one-dimensional outline are these two granite walls that you're looking at right now. So the walls break across the outline of the storage house as the storage house itself breaks across the outline of the two granite walls. So the granite walls are covered with polished black granite, polished so smoothly they will almost act like a mirror. And inside you'll have this series of kneeling figures, kneeling hunched figures representing the individuals that we lost in that space. But this is one of our early renditions, and the design has since been morphed as we've had further conversation. And so now as you look at those healing figures, as you get closer and closer to the water, they're going to appear to be emerging out of the concrete. And on the outside of these polished black granite walls is where we're inscribing the Maya Angelou quote, "And still I rise." So these are some of the things that we're trying to do in this space, honoring all the stories and the fullness of the stories of the African American journey. Top right, you've got our infinity reflection pool that will come up right to the edge of the waterfront there so that we are in conversation with the water. We do indeed face the Atlantic Ocean. And then you have an artist rendition of our ethnobotanical garden. Ethnobotanical is just a reference to the fact that the plantings in the space have been specifically curated for their relationship to either the Low Country, the West Coast of Africa, or some of our Caribbean neighbors, sort of representing the International African American Museum, and it begins that part of the story that we tell even at the exterior of our building. So from the land, the space having a story, we come into the galleries of the museum where, of course, we are telling the story. The mission of the International African American Museum is to honor the untold stories of the African American journey at one of our nation's most sacred sites. And one of the things that we like to acknowledge and gently tug at the edges of is that when we're talking about the African American journey, indeed, we are talking about this period of slavery and enslavement. Indeed, we are reclaiming this space. But what we like to acknowledge is that the story of slavery is not the beginning or the end of the African American journey. It is in the middle, right? And so that full context really helps us to understand that full impact. So that starts with the ethnobotanical garden and some of the other art installations we have, and it will carry into the museum, where we have several core exhibitions and galleries, in addition to a special exhibition and gallery and a small movie theater alongside all of our multimedia. By core exhibitions, we mean those exhibitions that will not change very often, very frequently. And then when we have our special exhibitions, we are working on the ability to change special exhibitions out every 6 to 12 months. To allow us to go into different conversations or perhaps different media than we normally do inside the museum. So clearly not going to take you through all of the galleries. I would not do that to you, but I have sort of pulled out 3 galleries in particular to kind of give you a sense of the breadth of the museum. Now, one of the questions we get is, okay, this is great. I'm a museum goer or I'm not a museum goer, and I'm trying to figure out what museums to go to and why. So how are you different from other African-American history museums? How are you alike other African-American history museums? What about the Smithsonian? Do you guys work with them? And so the answer to all of that is yes. The International African American Museum is indeed an encyclopedic museum, much like the Smithsonian is an encyclopedic museum, versus when you think of a contemporary art museum or a civil rights history museum or an American jazz museum. Those are very subject specific, right? And they take deep dives into single subjects. Encyclopedic means we cover a broad range of subjects over a broad range of time. So that is what we have in common with some of the larger history museums in the country. When we complete construction, the International African American Museum will be the second largest African American history museum in the country. We are very proud of that. But in addition to that, there are places that we can go and conversations we can have where there is no place better. than right here in South Carolina. And that's what we call sometimes putting on a Carolina lens for the national and international story. One of those nods is the Gullah Geechee Gallery. So now if you're here in the Low Country, if you're here in North Carolina, a little bit of northern Florida, all through Georgia, you're probably very familiar with references to the Gullah Geechee people. This is a community of African Americans who have maintained extraordinary ties to our African heritage, and many trace direct lineage to formerly enslaved people who were transported through the slave trade. Everything from the language to the food to the culture to the music, you can hear echoes and see very, very strong references. Arguably, every American history museum, particularly African American museums, should have some nod to a conversation about the Gullah Geechee people. But here in the Low Country, we are still considered one of the epicenters of the Gullah community. And so here we can tell the story in a way that gives us a living history gallery in our museum, because this is a alive, well, and thriving community, which makes it our best living history gallery and our most challenging living history gallery. The best living history gallery because people can come in and they can give you the story, from their perspective. This is how this happened. And the most challenging thing about this living history gallery is that people can come into the museum and give you the story from their perspective and tell you how this happened. So this definitely requires constant conversation with community, but it also lends itself very, very well to one of our galleries that will help us exemplify becoming a museum without walls. We've already got a partnership with the Charleston County Public Library. We added a Gullah storytelling line to their Dial Story program, and we're building relationships with storytellers and story keepers to be able to not only keep that program going, but to have a live version of that program once we open as a museum. Super quick preaching to the choir. One, there are several factors that allowed for this particular community of African Americans to hold on to the heritage. Part of it was the nature of the beast of slavery, which is the goal is you need to put a bunch of folks together who will not like each other, so they won't form a community, a common language, rise up, decide to be free. So what you will see is deliberate mixing of African communities, right? Different villages, different languages. If they were at war with each other when they were kidnapped, all the better. Whatever you could do to make sure that the people did not come together, form a common language, a culture, community, rise up, decide to be free. Happy to report, greatest failed social experiment ever, because that is exactly what ended up happening, that the people did come together, began to form new and common language based on all of that community culture, ultimately rose up, decided to be free. Then on top of that, you have the way that plantations in the Low Country in particular were rather isolated because of how inhospitable the land was, between the heat, the snakes, the alligators, and the mosquitoes. You would often find that the plantation owners had their homes in other places, more hospitable places. And it's thought that that lack of proximity may have made it much more possible for these communities to develop their cultures, create cultures that would thrive, perhaps hide them when the owners returned, or perhaps the existence of such a thing just on the plantation was not seen as such a threat. And of course, last but not least, during the Reconstruction period and beyond, when we began rebuilding the South after the Civil War, rest assured that the places where the newly freed slaves had been relegated to were not first in line for infrastructure investment. And so you don't get the roads, you don't get the bridges. So you're creating further isolation for these communities. And while we can lament the investment in resources there, one of the things that actually came out of that was the ability for them to continue to grow their culture. So here, Carolina Gold. So this is another opportunity for a Carolina lens. When we talk about the period of slavery, we talk about it through the rice. Rice was the cash crop of Charleston. It was the foundation of Charleston's wealth. And what we do is we help walk folks through the story of the humanity of the people inside of such an inhumane space. So we talk about the fact that many of the Africans who were brought into this space already knew how to plant rice. They knew the ways of rice growing, they knew the technology required, and it was through the ingenuity and know-how of those Africans that ultimately Carolina Gold, our wonderful rice, became one of the largest American imports during that time. At one point, Charleston was exporting more rice to the world than China. And a lot of that was due to the know-how and the understanding of rice growing of Africans that were being deliberately imported from ricing communities. And in some ways, we can tell how deliberate this was because if there was a notation or a mark that an African was coming from a community that already knew rice planting, their price was higher in this environment. And so while we do talk about the inhumanity of what was happening in that space, we do it while emphasizing the knowledge that the Africans were bringing. The last gallery, just to sort of give you a preview of the American Journeys Gallery. So we cover from about 1500 US, all the way as close as we can get to modern times before we had to call time and sort of stop telling the story. So this will be one of the places where we add Carolina lenses, where we had African American lenses to national stories. When you go to a museum, there are two things you want to be able to do. Everybody that comes into a museum has two intentions. One, learn something new. Two, brag about something they already know. So this is the gallery that will allow folks to do that, right? Because many of our American stories are going to be in this space. We're going to have people who've experienced these things firsthand, or this was a favorite thing that they studied. We'll have lots of artifacts, first edition copy of critical books. We've got tennis rackets from Althea Gibson's practice and professional collection. We have records and photos and documents, civil rights buttons galore, sort of in this space. So this will be a quote unquote classic history gallery with a new and refreshing lens so that folks can learn some stories as well as share some stories. So last but not least, first the space has the story, then the museum and the galleries and the programs are going to tell a story, and then we're going to invite our visitors to leave their story with us, even as they explore their own story. One of the most unique and identifying things about the International African American Museum will be our Center for Family History. Our Center for Family History is a world-class genealogy center and library. It's not a concept. It is actually a big, beautiful, rounded space in our building that will be staffed with genealogists and research assistants. We are already connected to the largest genealogy database in the world. And of course, part of this is we are a history museum, and every person, every family has a story. And so this is one of the places where all of our audiences will be able to explore and enjoy. But in particular, the African American story has a great interruption in the period of slavery. And when it comes to genealogy, that messes with record keeping. Everything from the rapid and repeated separation of families to things like the Wall of 1870, which reflects the fact that the US Census did not record Africans, African Americans, Black people by name until US Census in 1870. And so it's very difficult in some spaces and places to track genealogy back beyond that point for African Americans. And at one point, it was assumed that it was impossible. It is not, and we are developing expertise in that space. So we're developing classes, we'll have some walk-in hours, and of course, we will always be able to support folks remotely because that's actually how the Center for Family History was started. We've been doing some programs over the last 6 to 8 months, beginning to pilot and test things. So we are particularly excited about the Center for Family History and the various documents and stories that we can tell. And I think sometime in the future, it will dovetail quite well when the museum begins to develop its international travel program for our members and visitors. And so essentially, this is kind of the end of the formal presentation. As I mentioned, sort of one of the big concepts is building a museum without walls. I think thinking about the kinds of programming that we could be doing, the kinds of conversations that we can be hosting right now. For folks, you guys are kind of the home team. So here's a moment to celebrate us. My latest statistic is that our charter membership program is now at 39,000 charter members. And so we're all excited, and hopefully someone on the line is now feeling a little FOMO, fear of missing out, like, oh my gosh, there's 39,000 people, where have I been? As I mentioned, we are opening in January of 2023, January 21st. That is the Saturday following Martin Luther King Day. And so our charter membership program is coming into its evening hours. Charter membership is a special designation, a special way of thanking folks who believed in us before we were able to open our doors. And right now, all of our charter members have the much needed honor of helping us begin to start off our operating programs and support. So there's still a little time if you want to become a charter member or think that is an extraordinary 4th of July gift for your entire family, because you know where you're going to be next January and February. So with that, I will turn it back over to Lou.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. I'm going to stop the sharing so we can all sort of see one another again. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I had to put my earbuds in to make sure I could be silent here. So there are a few questions in the chat, and I'm going to go back and take a look at those very quickly. First question was about the vision for the museum. Did the vision come from some thoughts about another museum, or is there this sort of an independent vision?
This is largely an independent vision. If you do our timeline, even when we think about some of our sister and brother museums that have opened up in recent years, they've had a slightly shorter timeline than we have. The vision, the idea for the museum was initially set forth in 2000 in the State of the City address by former Charleston Mayor Joseph Riley. And so that is when sort of he began those conversations, and his inspiration was actually a book. It was actually in the reading that he was doing, not really other museums that he was visiting at that time. But as the journey continued, various advisory committees, various versions of the board, and former consultants and supporters did include visiting all kinds of museums all over the country to get ideas about how to do this and how to be special and add to the conversation.
Okay, I don't know where that noise is coming from. Somebody may have just signed on. Okay, a follow-up question on that is, let's see, just lost it for a second. Okay, you mentioned it took about 22 years to get this in place. The question was from the groundbreaking,
yes,
to January 23rd, how long of a period was that?
So guess when we broke ground? Fall of 2019. That's when we broke ground.
So, and then COVID hit. Okay. Another question is, who is your curator, and how could someone get in touch with them?
Just a little something, just minor. We have had several curators supporting us along the way. So I want to be sure to give full credit to the long list of historians that have helped us. Our current interim chief curator is a gentleman by the name of James Bartlett, and you'll be able to see a lot of him reflected in some of our multimedia experiences. In addition to his history background, he has a really strong background in using media and multimedia in storytelling. And dimensions. And so you can go to our website, and we've got a page that's actually dedicated to folks who think they may have materials that they want the museum to consider for a future exhibition or for future entry into our collection. And so you can go to that space and get in touch not only with the chief curator, but the entire curatorial team. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, there are just other comments about having joined already or getting ready to join, looking forward to it opening. But I think that's the list of questions. So if anybody has another question, please pop it in the chat very quickly, as we're going to wrap up in just a moment. Dr. Matthews, very entertaining. And we've actually lived here for 22 years. And so when we moved here, I started seeing International African American Museum. Okay, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and so forth. I'm just really happy it will.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, there was another quick question here. It was about African Americans tracing their roots. Are you using DNA to determine country of origin? And will there be a travel program that will help people discover their African roots?
Great question. So one, where we come in on sort of the DNA programs is we're going to be helping folks interpret the results that they get from sort of various organizations. We're exploring now who we might want to have partnerships with, but without a doubt, as folks get that information and bring it in, we can help them understand exactly what they're looking at. And I am hoping that in our early years, not on January 21st, but in our early years, that we will actually have an international traveling program. You see lots of museums that do indeed have travel programs, and they're dedicated to the themes that the museum talks about. And I can't think of a better theme than ancestry. And all the various places that we could go. Plus, African Americans have come from some of the most beautiful places on the planet. So there will be wonderful trips for both culture and history.
Okay, we have just a couple more. We'll run through those very quickly. Is there any plans for pre-opening events for people that might want to be a charter member, then attend these events?
Yes, so we are actually actively planning that now. There will be an opening ceremony of some sort, but we're also trying to fill in that weekend with things like a movie night, if we can do that, some live music that's also in the place, and extend it through the full week. It's a good problem to have, but we are expecting to be overwhelmed by folks who have been waiting. And I would, authentically suggest becoming a charter member, because when we do get into a space where we're trying to fit folks in, we will be sure that our charter members are the ones that have some way to get in the front of the line. Hopefully slightly more effective than the Disney Fast Pass, but I can't guarantee, I can't guarantee that it'll be any faster than that. But yeah, so at least for that first week and a half, we are very excited to be planning some events.
Okay, and one other question, and then we'll wrap it up. But someone was a little late entering. So in terms of becoming a charter member or a member in general, just go to the website.
Yes. Yeah. So just go to the website, and we have plenty of ranges. One of the nice things, we tried to make sure that, finances were the least barrier that folks have. And I also encourage everyone on the line to keep this region as number one. Listen, I love my friends from California and Nebraska, and I myself am a DC girl. But honestly, come on, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. We should really be winning the charter membership game. And so far we are.
Well, I thank you so much, Tonya. It was an excellent presentation. I hope everyone did enjoy this. Again, Mary Gass will send you the link for the recording probably in the next day or so you'll have that to be able to pass along to folks. And in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for joining us.